The HRB MeetUP series continues again tonight, this time with a look at Lieutenant Governor candidate Winsome Sears, and I'm going to bring her on the screen right about now. Ms. Sears, good evening, and welcome to the
Good evening.
HRBC MeetUP series. Are you doing well tonight?
I am doing well. I like to say I am blessed and highly favored. I'm doing well.
Yes,
Hope
ma'am.
your
Yes,
viewers
ma'am.
are doing well as well.
Oh, indeed. I bet they're just enjoying themselves on this Tuesday evening. Now, before we jump right into the questions, I'd like you to tell us more about yourself, your history both at home and abroad.
So thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I tell you, sometimes it's great to be anywhere. My name is Winsome Sears, and I'm running to be the next Lieutenant Governor of our great Commonwealth. My father is where my story begins because my father was allowed to enter America in 1963. As a matter of fact, it was August 11th of 1963. That was just 17 days before Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech. And so I said to my father, "Why would you come then? It was a bad time for us." And he said, "Because this is where the jobs were." And I said, "Yeah, but you came at the height of the civil rights movement." And he said, "Well, this is where the opportunities were." He only came with $1.75, and he took any job he could find. He put himself through school and started his career. And so now he's comfortably retired. And I say that to say education lifted my father out of poverty. Education lifted me out of poverty because I have to find my own way in this world. Education will lift us all. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening. And that's one reason why I'm running, because, it is time for us to really get generational wealth going. And so hopefully we can do that.
Excellent, excellent. So, are you ready to answer questions that we believe will be important to Hampton Roads voters?
Let's start.
All right. So, the first one, I think you touched on it slightly there in the intro, but why are you really interested in becoming Virginia's lieutenant governor, and what do you understand the role of it to be?
Well, I want to be lieutenant governor because of the education aspect. It's why I'm running. There are other issues, and we can talk about that. But number one is education, because without an education, you're going nowhere and you're going to get there very fast. We know because, well, I used to be on the State Board of Education. I was elected vice president of it. And what we know is when we look at the NAEP scores, National Assessment of Educational Proficiency, we find that by the 8th grade, children in Virginia, 45% of white children are failing math, 35% of Asian children, 70% of Latino children. And this number brought tears to my eyes, and I had to call a colleague to confirm because I'm not on the board and I haven't been for 6 years now. 84% of Black children, by the time they reach 8th grade, can't do math. And 85% of them are functionally illiterate. And indeed, we know, even the NAACP has said that the school to prison pipeline has already started. Because if you're not on grade level by the time you're in the 8th grade, it's not going to end well. And by the way, these children, they almost never catch up. And so we have got to do something about it. And I'm the one to do it. I have talked to enough parents, Black, Asian, etc. What they want is to be able to send their child to any school that they want. They tell me that the real racism is when you can't send your child to any school that you want, because if you're rich, you don't want your child to go to the school system that you've moved into, you have options. But when you're poor, you don't. You're stuck in a failing school.
Now,
Well, I didn't answer the second part of your question.
Yeah, it's about the role of the lieutenant governorship and just what you understand it to be.
So, the Constitution tells us what the role of the lieutenant governor is, and, that I am second in charge and that I preside over the Senate. As you know, I'm not part of the Senate club. There are senators, it's their Senate. I'm the president of it. Of course, necessarily, I am the tie-breaking vote, and this current lieutenant governor has already been breaking ties. And in fact, it was a Republican lieutenant governor why we have some semblance of a school choice, because there's a school, for example, in Petersburg, and that school, the population is fully Black population. If that scholarship goes away, which the Democrats have threatened, then that school goes away and the children go back to a failing school. There are schools in Richmond that fully Black population that the parents have opted them out of into this new school system, and they're doing very well. They're thriving. If they're out of that school, if the scholarship goes away, the kids go back to a failing school. So I see my role, again, it's all about education. And then, of course, the lieutenant governor has to be able to step in when it comes to, being governor. You have to be ready for that.
Now, before I go to my next question, I want to put a comment up on the screen from who happens to be another candidate in the 91st, Charles West. Stop rendering our children victim to mismanagement. So now I'm on to the next question. In order to create a culture of inclusion within state government, what strategies would you use to boost diversity and inclusion initiatives, thereby promoting opportunities for all residents in employment, business, and services?
Well, just by being there, I think that people will look at me, and I hope children will look at me and say, well, if Winsome is there, then I can be there, because I didn't do anything special except stay in school and study. And everywhere I go and I meet the kids and the young people, I say, you can do what I'm doing, because remember now, I'm not even first generation American. I am still the immigrant. My father brought me to America when I was 6. And now here I am running for the second highest office in the land. And by the way, I've held office before. And so, and done other things as well. I had my own business. And so one of the things I want to do when we talk about business, we, in contracts, for example, we do have a law that says you must consider getting minority businesses as part of the subcontract or whatever it is. You must find that. Well, we've found that companies skirt that issue because they say, they do some perfunctory look and say, well, we didn't find minority businesses that could really fulfill the parts of the contract that we need. It's stupid. It's nonsense. So one of the things I want to do is to put in a bill that says your contract, when it's awarded, it must be 15% must go towards minority-owned business. Then you can't get away from that requirement. And then as a woman in business and in non-traditional businesses, in fact, we need more mentorships. We need entrepreneurships, apprenticeships. We need women in the trades, for example, move into those fields that pay more. And then we have, as you know now, community colleges where it's free. You can get 6-figure incomes, a decent 5-figure, where you make more money. And so let's take advantage of those opportunities. For example, cybersecurity, medical technology, and there's some others. They're out there. They're just waiting for us to take advantage of them.
Excellent. Now, we also just got a comment from Miss Nakia Miller, who I will add that a little later, right around question 5, because that matches right around with that topic. So on for question 3. Public officials today should embrace their advocacy roles and more thoroughly advocate for social justice. What lieutenant governor role will you play in supporting racial and social justice?
Well, I'm Black. I've been Black all my life. I'm not going to vote against, Black people. I'm not going to vote against white people, Asian people, Hispanic people. I want everybody to have opportunity. I came to America. My father brought me, as I said, there is opportunity. We need to take advantage of those opportunities. Nothing that I have was ever given to me. I've had to work for it. And so what I say is, let's take advantage of those opportunities that are here. When I was in a work environment, I didn't have my college degree. And I understood that unless I had that degree, I would not be treated in the way that I thought I should be, so that I would have opportunities for advancement. So I went back to college. I didn't get my degree until I was married. I had my children. I had 3 children under 5. And it was a terrible time, to be going back to college, but I did it. And so it can be done. There are advantages already there. We need to take advantage of them.
Let me jump back on here. Now, for question number 4, this goes back a little bit more toward business and economics. How would you support local Black-owned business growth and overall Black economic development?
So I already talked about that when I mentioned that we need to ensure that with the law I want to pass, that 15% of the contract must be awarded to a minority business owner. It has to be. The current law is very lenient in that it just says, well, you have to look. And then if you can't find anybody, well, then you can do what you want to do. I'm saying it must. We also have to ensure that the minority SWAM, because I have a business and unfortunately I lost my business, and we'll talk about that some more because of policies that this administration put forward. But I was part of SWAM, and so there are opportunities there that you can look and find. And we actually have to do better with that. Now that I think about that some more, we've got to do better with SWAM. I don't have all the answers. Mm-hmm. You all have answers that you can help me find. And so I want the minds that have the answers to come along and help me with that so that we can get there.
Now, before I go into the next question, which is about education, which I'll mix Nikia's comments together into that. You mentioned just now that you had a business. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience in that and things that you could see the state government should do?
Well, I started my business. It was a name and a phone number, just a name and a phone number. I didn't have I didn't have any employees. I didn't have any tools. I had nothing. And so I just started cold calling. I started cold calling people. I went door to door, dropped my information. I printed up postcards. I bought names of lists and some other things. And then we were off and running. It wasn't easy. There were some days I didn't know how I was going to pay my employees, but the Lord provided, and there we were. And I didn't get a paycheck. I had to build the business and build the business. I aligned myself with companies that I knew would use my business. I went into programs. I used the Small Business Association that's located in just about every community college. I picked their brains and they helped me. And I didn't get any special treatment because I'm Black or a woman or anything. I just kept working hard. And I also joined like the Chamber of Commerce. I also joined business groups that were helpful to me. That's what you have to do. And eventually my business got off the ground. It was very successful. I had 3 trucks. I was looking to get another truck. I had employees. We were doing fine. I had more business than I knew what to do with. And this administration, because of the unemployment insurance, people started leaving. And then the employees that were left, we were cannibalizing each other's employees. I jacked up my prices so I could pay my employees more. And I was already paying them quite a bit. But when you're in the situation where you're in a labor shortage, you have to do what you have to do. So my customers are screaming about my prices, but I have to keep my employees. But the bigger corporations were able to pay them even more than I could. And that was because of the labor shortage that was created by this administration. And I'm not the only one. I heard from a woman who came from Nigeria with nothing. And she said to me, what am I going to do? I'm going to lose my business because my employees are all out on unemployment. She's not the only one. I've heard from so many. So when you're talking about helping minority businesses, well, my woman-owned, veteran-owned, Black-owned business was destroyed, and I'm not the only one. Elections do have consequences.
Now, touching again on business ownership, we had a comment from Mr. Jeff Staples who wanted to know about legacy wealth and legacy income. Just talk a little bit about that.
So what I mean by that is, unfortunately, our children keep starting at the bottom, and that is because of the education level not being attained. And I met a gentleman, a Black gentleman. We were talking about education and what the children are and aren't learning. And he's my age. And he said when he went through school, he wasn't educated at all. And he left school. They graduated him, but he didn't have the tools. He was functionally illiterate. He had to teach himself through night school and then get a GED. And his wife had to help him. And so, this is continuing. In fact, right now in Charlottesville, they have declared, I think it was 3 months ago, the Charlottesville public schools declared that 86% of their children are gifted. 86% of their children are gifted. The only problem with that is that 50% of them can't even pass the SOLs. So who are you fooling? And then when you look at the city of Lynchburg, I was talked to by, well, I'm not going to say who told me, but he said, Winsome, I'm looking at 1,000 Fs, 1,000 Fs, because fully half of the children never, ever even signed on during the whole school year, half of them. And so what did the city of Lynchburg decide to do? They decided to promote those children, the social promotion. You can't create wealth if you don't have the education. It has to start there. Now you can extrapolate what you want from that, but I'm just telling you, it starts there. And then when we look at the jobs, let's say the lower level jobs, and I'm not saying that all jobs have dignity. I'm just saying, let's start with a good education. If you say, well, we have McDonald's or whatever, those jobs are going away. Robotics are taking those over. And so we've got to get our children educated. We know what works. We just have to have the will. The parents want it. Let us give to the parents the opportunity to send their children to a school that is a good school.
Now, before we leave the business legacy income topic to move on to education, because that is my next topic, I do want to touch on here because Miss Andrea Dixon asked, how are you coming up with 15%? Would it be closer to equity for contracts to be associated with the overall Black population in the state? So
well, I come up with the 15% because actually in Ohio, they do have that law. They passed it and it's working. So, we don't always have to reinvent the wheel. We can look where else, what other state is doing what. And if it's working, let's do that. But at least, you have to take what you can get and then you go back for another day and try to get some more. But at least let's do 15% and then let's try for more later on. Some things, it's hard to swallow. So you take what you can get and you fight another day for more. But at least let's start with that.
All right. Now I think we're ready to move on to going more depth on education itself. You just touched on it, but let's go a little bit deeper here. Here's my question. Then I'm going to add in Nakia's question because it's on the same topic. How would you support the goal of eliminating disparate education outcomes across our various communities and strengthen them for all? That's my question. And Nakia wants you to bring that together by explaining how you think that supporting scholarships in charter schools instead of enriching children and improving education in the Commonwealth as a whole by increasing, full education funding. Because it's a very large question. I wanted to condense it a little bit, and we'll just talk about that in education right now.
Well, we have to ask ourselves, is what we have now working? And if the parent of a child in a disadvantaged school says what we have is not working, then what are we to say to the parent? No, your child must attend this school. Your child must attend a failing school. And so we say, all right, let's throw more money at it. Is the money going to help? I don't think so. Because when we look at what we are paying our teachers, well, it costs about $17,000 per child right now. And in some places it's more, some places it's a little bit less to educate a child. And so when you look at private schools and charter schools, they're doing a whole lot with a lot less. So we can educate our children for less. Furthermore, we know that in every profession, just like there are bad police, there are bad doctors, bad lawyers, there are bad teachers. Well, what we have found is that in the economically disadvantaged schools, more of those teachers are concentrated in those types of schools. And furthermore, the newer teachers, and you can't get rid of them. And so what happens is those teachers keep moving from one school to the other. They just move them and move them around. Then and the teachers know who they are. The principals know who they are. Then we also have the situation where those schools, they get the teachers right out of school. And so they don't have the classroom experience. They don't have the other types of experience. And so they stay about 2 years and then they move on. Now, you can't fault people for wanting to get ahead. Don't fault those teachers, but it just keeps, it doesn't get any better. It just keeps getting worse and worse. And so what we say is, please allow the money to follow the child and not the school system, not the brick building. Because in my business, for example, I would love it if when you moved into my neighborhood, you had to use my business. You could use no other business at all but mine. That's the way it is with the school system. The way to have the children do better is to have some competition. It's working in Florida. A lot of Black people in Florida love it. I have met enough Black people who have come from Florida. They want that here, and they wonder, why don't we have it? In North Carolina, charter schools, there's about 180, if I'm not mistaken. In Maryland, there's 140. In Virginia, we have eight. In Washington, D.C., there are over 100. Washington, D.C., as you know, is primarily Black. And so just like I came up with that 15%, you look and see what's working elsewhere. In Florida, they have found that when the parent opts the child out of that school, and by the way, you don't get the cream of the crop. You have to take whoever you're given. It's a lottery system. By the time the child is 3 or 4 years in that new school system, guess what? They're either on grade level or they are past grade level. So what I'm saying is, it works. Let's try it. Let's give the kids an opportunity to succeed, because our children must not just survive. They must thrive. They must be able to have marketable skills so that they can compete on a global scale. Education, again, is what lifted my father out of poverty, lifted me.
I believe that my good friend Nakia over in Hampton is also quite passionate about education, and her opinion is, and I'll put it on the screen, she's a parent, and I believe in making education equitable for all. I have another comment here from Mr. Mike Cummins, who believes that, let me just throw that up there. Cases are talking about schools being deprived of not disadvantaged, so equitable funding and critical for public education. We have, I guess, views that money should be more embraced and spread out as many schools as possible to make sure that they are improved, if I'm trying to bring their opinions in on that one correctly.
Well, now, I don't know. When I've been knocking on doors in neighborhoods, in public housing, in other areas, and the parents are telling me, we want to have school choice. What do I say to them? No, your child must stay in that school. Your child must stay in that school. We'll just give you more money. I can't see that. I can't tell a parent that.
That, I guess I would follow up again with another comment just now by Miss Andrea. Is just, how do you reform what would be known as the bad schools? If such, I don't want to call schools bad overall, but less performing schools. How do we improve that?
Well, as I said, competition helps. When I was on the school board, another thing that we did was we closed bad schools. The children are not learning. 5 years, and in 5 years, the children are shown to be not learning. Something is wrong. And so we would close those schools, and then we would have other schools where they would have an opportunity to choose. Some of them went to charter schools. Some of them went to other schools. We know that we need to be able, for example, to fire bad teachers. It happens in other in business. An employee can't do the job, you get rid of them. You run with the employees that are good. It's just like everything else. I know that in Florida they have Saturday school. It's working there. I know that in Florida they also have tutoring, after school tutoring. It's written in their contracts. And there are some other things. But I can tell you now that you can go right now and talk to a principal and ask them, who are the bad teachers? They know. They know, but they can't get rid of them. And so the children are stuck with these teachers. And I've got to tell you this, we also have teachers who are teaching in subjects that they're not certified in. And so you have an English teacher, for example, who's teaching physics. I guess that's all well and good. It's not helping the child. We have to understand this is the future of the child we're talking about. They don't get do-overs. And by the way, we have found that when the children graduate from school, what we found is that if they go to college, then that first year, 70% of them spend that first year in remedial education, learning what they should have learned in high school. And then we've already talked about what's still happening currently. We still have social promotion. I just showed you that in Charlottesville, it's happening. It's happening in the city of Lynchburg. It's happening everywhere. Something's got to change because the children are not learning.
I could definitely tell by reading all these comments, which are fast and coming in, that education is definitely important for all the viewers tonight. So I definitely want to bring that up in the sense that if after the show tonight you have a little bit of time to just come back on and answer one-on-one to these comments, that might be
now here's something that we must honor those teachers that are doing well. There are teachers, we know of teachers in our own lives where you can say, if it weren't for Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, we wouldn't have gotten where we are. We need to honor those teachers and pay them more. And as a matter of fact, we want to do that. We want to ensure that those teachers who are going above and beyond, why can't we pay them more? Do you know we can't? The contracts say that you can't. Everybody has to be paid this or that. It doesn't make any sense. And here's another thing. Our teachers are unfortunately using their own funds to fund resources for their classroom. It shouldn't be. We ought to pay teachers enough money, and then we ought to provide the resources for the classroom. And we don't even really have to raise taxes to do that, because most of the money is unfortunately in higher administration. It's up, in the higher levels. It needs to come down into the classroom so that it can serve the children and the teachers better.
All right. Now, before I move on to my next question, which will be about the relationships of state governments and the schools and the community itself, if I recall recently that the average pay for teachers in Virginia is actually relatively low compared to the nation at hand. So you just touched on raising pay for teachers. Is that something you would actively want to try to support?
Yes, absolutely. It's just like any other profession. If you do well, you ought to get paid more. If you're performing higher than others, you ought to be able to be paid more. That's how it works in business. It should work in the teaching profession. It works everywhere else.
All right. Now I want to go on to this topic, which sort of blends state government and schooling and the community itself. How would you want to build relationships with the state government and school and the wider community at hand to make everything more copacetic?
Can you give me an example of what it is that you're asking? I'm not sure what you're asking.
How, for instance, you can tell from these comments that we care a lot about.
I can't actually see the comments.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they're as I'm monitoring this, there's just comment, and I like that. I hope you guys all keep commenting here. But education is very big on their minds, but they have it's sort of like a distrust, you might say, of politicians and government funding mechanisms. So how do we sort of make us like it better, if that makes sense? What could your role be in being more transparent and optimistic in such a way that they suddenly like the state government again.
So
If I
your
made it
question,
sound better. I
yeah,
don't know if I
I'm
did.
not sure what that question is asking. There's a funding formula that you have to balance with Northern Virginia, with Hampton Roads, with the rural areas, and it's very hard to put it together. It's called the composite index, and so I'm not sure what the question is asking. That's not something the lieutenant governor would have any role in.
That's fair.
Yeah, so I'm really not sure what the question is asking.
All right, so let's move on to question 7. This is kind of long, but bear with me. Many Americans are willing to accept major racial prejudices, privileges, and disparities confronting our nation, but many others welcome concrete advice on what government should do. So, in order to fill that last one's need, what race relations actions would you take to increase momentum and make us all one Virginia in the 21st century?
Well, I am the Republican nominee for lieutenant governor. I am a Black woman running for lieutenant governor in Virginia. Think about that. I am an immigrant. I came from another country, another culture, and here I am running for lieutenant governor. I think that says something about America as a whole. I am a business owner. I'm a business owner. I started my business, was a very successful business until, this administration decided to make different choices. In fact, my business was thriving even through COVID because it was deemed an essential business. I know people who lost their business because this government said they were not essential. And bam, they were gone. I want folks to understand that we can all live together. Everything that I've had, I worked for it. I wasn't given anything. I joined organizations that I thought would be helpful to me. I made friends with, I called, there's a thing, a meme that I have, and it says, sit with the warriors because the conversation is different. I found like-minded people and I asked them to mentor me. I asked them to help me. We do what we need to do. And so when you look at someone like me, a woman also in supposedly male-dominated businesses, and just about everything I've done, it was somehow or the other male-dominated. But I never let that stop me. You just keep thriving. You keep pushing. You keep fighting. Again, I'm a woman, a Black woman, an immigrant, and here I am. I'm running for the second highest office. If that doesn't mean anything, that I don't know what will. And yet, I ran a prison ministry. I ran a prison ministry, a men's prison ministry for 2 years. It was my job to bring a message of hope. I also ran a homeless shelter for women and their children. Tried to find jobs for them, tried to find medical for them, whatever it was, so that they could get on their feet. I saw in them things that they couldn't see for themselves, and so I had to keep that spark alive. And so we got big brothers and big sisters to help the children, tutor the children. I mean, we know how to do this. It's not that difficult. We can do it. Our children can do it. And once again, I say, if the children think that what I'm running for office and I was special, no, all I did was stay in school and study.
All right. Now, you had been a delegate. You have worked in Richmond in the state government before, and you're a business owner. And you've lived amongst the community for many, many years. So if you blend all that together, what fresh ideas might you have on improving state government relationships with the citizens?
So for me, the reason why I ever got into politics anyway, I never thought that I would be the candidate. I always thought that I would be maybe the campaign manager or the person behind the candidate. I would write the speeches. I would go knock on doors and help, whatever. I would organizationally help the candidate. But you see, nobody ever knocked on my door because I'm Black. And so the Democrats, I guess, assumed that they already had me, didn't ask me for my opinions. And Republicans didn't come because I guess they figured it would take so many election cycles to win me. And so nobody asked me for my opinion. When I look at a white person, I don't know if they're Democrat, Republican, Green Party, Reform Party, Libertarian. I don't know what they are. And so, you have to ask them for the vote. But people look at someone like me and they assume, I don't want that for us. I want us to have true political power. Now, we talk about the relationship between, let's say, the politician and the electorate. That's why I ran. I wanted to show true servant leadership. So one of the things that I did, I had office hours. I wanted the people to just come, shoot the breeze. I had office hours twice a week. Nobody ever came. So I went back and knocked on doors again. I wanted to meet the people. I wanted them to understand that the power that I have comes from them, of the people, by the people, for the people. It means something. And they would almost, just about everybody would say, why are you here? You already won the election. That's terrible. That's absolutely terrible that they don't see their elected officials until it's election time again. But anyway, I met this group. It was a Black community, and they were elderly, Black community land homeowners. Their homes were being taken by eminent domain, and they weren't going to get a lot of money to live on. Where were they going to move to with the little bit of money that they were given? So I spoke to the university president who was trying to take their homes. I spoke to their attorney, went back and talked to the people, and the people called me and said, Delegate Sears, I'm going to get more money than if you hadn't come. Now, suppose I hadn't come. What? They were going to get thousands of dollars, thousands. Why didn't they know that they could call on me for redress to protect them from their government? Why didn't they know that? That's what I'm talking about. Here's another thing, talking about transparency. I paid for one teacher from each of my schools and one neighborhood leader from each of my neighborhoods to come to Richmond and shadow me for 2 days. I paid for their meals, their mileage, and their hotels. And they loved it. When I was on the floor of the House, they were on the floor of the House. They were listening to the banter back and forth and the laws being passed or rejected. When any advocacy group came to my office, they were in my office and they would ask the questions of the groups. Why do you want her to vote this way? Why do you want her to vote that way? They would ask the questions. They would go to meetings with me. If I ate, they ate. If I didn't eat, they didn't eat. And then they would go home and another group of two would come. I paid for them to come out of my own campaign funds because I wanted them to understand how their government truly worked. I would like to do that once again, if God willing, I'm elected as lieutenant governor, but I want to start with the children. I want to get the children involved so that they understand that this is their government too.
Really like the sound of that because, I'm a fan of government itself. So I just like hearing stuff like that. And just like Charles West does, because he says that every day should be lobby day. And when the General Assembly is in session, legislators should be working and not fundraising. Yeah. So as we get ready for the last question of the night, I just want to ask you, why should Virginians vote for you?
I am asking Virginians to take a chance on me. I want you to know that I intend to do well for the Commonwealth, that I care about our children, that I care that our business environment is such that other businesses will want to relocate to Virginia. Indeed, we have seen that the Ford plant that's going to a border state, Tennessee, for a whole year looked for a place to go. But they were concerned about right to work. And I'm not against unions. I just think that people should be able to choose if they want to decide to have their money go towards a union. They ought to be able to do that. They worked hard for that money. Let them choose. So this Ford plant looked at right to work, looked at electricity rates. And by the way, my opponent and this current legislators, they raised our electricity rates, so that's out. And then, of course, they wanted to ensure that the population would be educated, because businesses are not going to relocate to an area where the population is undereducated. And so they chose Tennessee. We could have had those jobs here. They are building a 6-mile long plant with all those jobs. We've lost other opportunities. And so I'm saying, let us have an environment where businesses can grow, where businesses want to relocate, where we don't keep losing out to other states, border states, in fact. And then we have to make sure that our police are, keeping us safe. As I've said before, in every profession, there are bad apples. We know that there are some in law enforcement. We need to get rid of them. And then we will keep the good police officers, the good folks in the Department of Corrections, and et cetera. Why? Because we need our police. When we need help, if we're being assaulted, we're calling the police. If our cars are stolen, we're calling the police. So we get rid of the bad apples. We get training. We get reciprocal agreements with other states so that we know who is coming and applying for these positions. If you're a bad apple in that state, we don't want you here. We need to open substations in our communities again, because we need our children to want to be police officers. There was a time when police officers were mentors to our children, especially if there was not a father in the home. And so we need them to get out of their cars and be on the beat. But we need our police officers. Always remember, when you are running away from the violence, they are running to it. And they have families. We don't know if they'll make it. And then we need to take care of our mental health when it comes to the policing. As I said, we need that training. We really need to ensure that Virginia works for everybody. And finally, here's the thing. We can't continue to be at each other's throats. There is divisiveness, and it's unfortunate. Black against white, Asians against Latinos, and Latinos against this. And and unfortunately, I think our politicians want it that way. Because then they can step in and be savior. And we've seen policies that are like that. Let's not have that anymore. As Rodney King said, can't we all just get along? We can make it. And as Martin Luther King Jr. said, hate can't drive out hate. Only love can do that. Thank you.
All right. Now, I want to extend a hearty thank you for answering these important questions for the Hampton Roads Black Caucus. And if you could tell the viewers how they could more readily keep up with your race and follow you.
Yes. So please go to my website, winsomesears.com, winsomesears.com, and email me. I want to say this one thing. We have a saying in church, and many of you have probably heard it. I may not be what I'm supposed to be, but I ain't what I used to be. And that's America. She may not be what she's supposed to be, but she's surely not what she used to be. This is not 1963 when my father came at the height of the civil rights movement, where we couldn't live where we want. We couldn't eat where we want. We couldn't, it was bad. It was a bad time. We have now had a Black president elected not once, but twice. Our current vice president is a Black woman whose father is of Jamaican heritage, like myself. And so we do have a ways to go, but let's acknowledge that some things have changed, and they have changed for the better. We'll get there. We'll bring everybody with us. We'll get there.
Thank you again, Delegate Sears, for coming on this HRBC meetup, and I wish you have a great night tonight, and we'll see you around.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. I look forward to hearing from you, and please vote for me so that we can have change. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Have a great one. All right, everybody. That, ladies and gentlemen, was former Virginia Delegate Winsome Sears. She was our guest on the HRBC meetup series. I definitely want you all to catch up on our next shows. They happen to be tomorrow evening, featuring candidate for Norfolk Commissioner of the Revenue, Nicole Sanders, and Virginia delegate candidate, Deanna Stanton. This has been Conrad Chisholm in Virginia Beach. We will catch you next time tomorrow night.